Yeah, okay, I'll just start. My name's Akshay. I'm a senior here at U of M. I'm part of MEMCO, DJ and producer, definitely producer first. I've been producing for about 2 or 3 years, I'd say. I'm using FL Studio. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means, but I have, I've been through the struggle of learning it to the point where I feel confident that I could kind of break down the barriers to learning to all of you guys, because honestly, my whole life I tried to learn, as early as probably middle school, I've tried to learn FL Studio or just how to produce music on my computer. And for the longest time, I found it so hard for years and years. I couldn't do it until I finally figured it out and was like, wow, that's actually not that hard. It's just kind of confusing. So yeah, Bill just went ahead and taught you guys all this stuff in Ableton. Now I'm switching to another software entirely. I would say my best explanation is there are different ways, different programs to do the same thing. There's not really much that one can do that the other can't. You would just go about doing it in different ways. With that being said, I find the interface to FL Studio to be a lot easier for a new user to learn, just because it's really, really pretty. One other thing, the demo for FL Studio doesn't expire, so you can kind of tinker around with it endlessly. The only thing is you can't, you can save your projects, but you can't open them again. That's the big limitation. But the main point is you could tinker and use it to its full functionality as much as you want. If you're a producer that ultimately is interested in performing your music and performing it live, I'd strongly recommend using Ableton Live, because that's pretty much the standard for live performance and triggering things with MIDI clips. Pretty much every electronic producer, if they're performing their stuff live, they're using Ableton. And even if they don't produce in Ableton, they're still performing in Ableton because it has the arrange session view. Yeah, it's great for that. So yeah, who here has experience producing in any capacity? Awesome, cool, yeah. So what I'm gonna do is go into some kind of basic stuff about FL Studio itself, and then just talk more about more general of song arrangement and writing, I guess, like a traditional electronic song. So yeah, if you already are deep into Ableton, the first part doesn't apply to you, but the second part definitely still can be applied to any DAW, whichever you use. And yeah, once you get to the point of proficiency with one DAW, you'll find it pretty easy to kind of go back and forth between others, because they all are doing the same thing, just in different ways. So with that being said, I'll just hop right in. So basically, there's two different kind of parts to two different elements that make up a song for the most part. What Bill was saying earlier, there's either an instrument, which would be a MIDI track, or a sample, which is kind of just a one-shot sound. So here you have a keyboard. This would be an instrument. The technical word is VST, but the main point is you can play it like an instrument, and then it'll record out to MIDI. Now the other thing is just going to be a sample. Let me find some sample. Here, samples. They're all one shots, one single audio clip. And you'll find that your song is going to be composed of both samples and instruments or VSTs. So yeah, let me just kind of show you what's going on here. So this in FL Studio is called the channel rack, and that's basically where all your instruments are going to be. Here's where I have my FL keys. That's the keyboard I just opened up here, and then yeah, this is where all your instruments are, and this here is called the playlist, and that's where your whole song is going to be arranged. So let me just switch into another window. So once you had a song written, it's going to look like this in the playlist with all this different stuff going on. So yeah, let me hop back here. So let me just get started by, I guess I'll play a little melody or something. So yeah, here in the channel rack is where all your instruments are, and if you want to play any of the instruments, you right-click on it and click piano roll. And then the piano pops up, and I'm just going to play something really random. Okay, I just made that up on the fly, whatever, here it is. So the one big difference between Ableton Live and FL Studio is kind of the way the tracks are broken down. In FL Studio, your whole song is broken up into things called patterns, and it's basically, you could think of each pattern as like a different element to your track. So right here, I just made a pattern, and then you basically take all your patterns and arrange them in the playlist to make your song. So I just made a pattern here in the channel rack, and like I'll go to my playlist, and you just kind of click it and drag it in. So then here it shows that I'm in pattern 1. I would go up to another pattern and like, I'll just make a kick just to like illustrate. Then now you'd go and put in your next element. So you see like the first pattern here was my keyboard, then the next pattern was going to be my drums, you see. So yeah, your whole song, you're going to break it down into different patterns basically, and then kind of combine them all together on your canvas, which is the playlist. So I'll show that in the context of a song I've made, maybe it'll make sense. So here's my first pattern. It is some bass thing here. My next pattern is just some hi-hats. Here's another bass thing. Yeah, so the main point to illustrate is that you kind of like break down each element of your song and then put it all together to make the final product. So with that being said, there's this button here that is pattern view and song view. If it's clicked on song, it'll play the playlist. It'll play your whole song. If you click pattern, it'll just play the pattern you have currently selected. So right here, it's just going to loop that over and over. And then if you click song, it'll play this whole thing here. So what next? Yes. You'll generally find that your song is going to be a combination of arranging instruments, which are MIDI, and samples as well. So like this obviously won't sound good, but like here you'd have some instrument, and then let's say you find some samples you like. You could drag them straight into the playlist, and now those are going to be present in your track. If you drag one over it, it'll replace it and give you a new one. So yeah, you use samples for certain parts of your song, I guess, and actual instruments for other parts, and you kind of put them together to get a full cohesive song. All your instruments are going to be here, and samples are generally just going to be one sound. But if you double-click any sample, you can kind of do some effects similar to what Bill was showing in Ableton. Like there's reverse, there's like boost, all this other stuff. But you can also take a sample and drag it. Usually you drag a sample straight onto your playlist, and then you have that one audio clip. But you can also take the sample and drag it onto your channel rack, and now if you went to piano roll, you could play that sample as an instrument. So yeah, that's a pretty basic breakdown of I guess arrangement in FL Studio. The primary difference is the way the song's broken down into patterns and how you kind of build each part of your song separately and then put it all together, and like the arrangement of the song is almost a little different from actually composing it. So yeah, I'm gonna now just talk a little bit about yes, tricks to arranging a song and some stuff like that, and then I'm either gonna make a quick song or break down one I've made, depending on, or both, depending on how much time there is. So one important thing to understand about songs in general is that I guess each part of the song has its own like frequency. You know, higher notes are higher frequency, lower notes are lower frequency, and the best way to visualize this in your head is that frequencies are a spectrum, and basically some things will have high frequencies, some things will have low frequencies, but in the context of your overall song, you want every element of the song to kind of have its own section of the frequency range, so the song sounds full as a whole, and you also don't want too much of multiple elements in the same frequency range, because then they'll kind of clash with each other and sound muddy. So I'm just going to go over some the basic concept of EQing. That's probably the most important effect you'll find that goes on or is required in production. There's plenty of other effects, but EQing is like key. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put another instrument out here to illustrate. So here, I'll drag an instrument, and now I have another one that I can play. One more thing is that here, oh, whoa. Oh my God, I'm so silly. I plugged in the charger and didn't plug it into my laptop. One sec. Yeah, my bad. Feel free to stop me with any questions at any point, by the way. Yeah, there is. I was going to get to that in a sec and show how that helps to visualize everything. Let me just...
I noticed when you were snapping the sounds together, the crossfading kind of, or not crossfading, but the fading from one sound sample to another was kind of in there, or what? Does the software do that for you, or?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, interesting. It flowed really well. So
it was just a coincidence. Okay. Yeah. So, similar to Ableton, all your audio is going to be on the left side. Right here, I have my extensive sample library, more samples than I need probably. And then if you click here, it shows your plugins, which are like your actual instruments. And that's once again the difference between a sample and an instrument. So I just dragged in another instrument here. In the channel rack, you can right-click on anything and cut or copy, and it'll just, so I'm going to copy it and basically go to a new pattern and just copy that bass line, copy that melody onto a different instrument, and that instrument is going to be the bass. So here now we have a bass line. Doesn't sound great, but it's okay. So yeah, now the way this would be like arranged in the greater context is I have pattern 1 here with my melody, and then I'd go to pattern 3 here, and they would now, do you hear how they're both, you know, playing the same thing, but they're kind of taking up different areas of the frequency spectrum. So this is going to be your sub bass, it's going to be the lower part, and then this is obviously really high, and you'd want other stuff in between probably to make the song sound full as a whole. But back to the thing of EQing, this here is the mixer. That's basically where you apply all your effects to any type of track. And what you do is these numbers here correspond to the mixer channel that you're working with. So here, I'm going to go ahead and change this to 5, and now this track is routed to the piano. And then here are your mixer effects. You can add up to 10 or more, but I'm going to go ahead and just add a basic EQ. And this will help you kind of visualize what I was saying about the frequency. So this is showing the frequency spectrum, and it's showing basically like the lower frequencies of the sound are here, higher frequencies are here, and where it's kind of like really red, that's where the majority of the frequencies are occurring. So this you can see is mostly like low-mid frequencies, and when you EQ, you want to do a combination of like boosting certain frequencies that you want to hear in instruments, and then cutting out other frequencies that you don't want to clash. So like a really basic thing is like, let me go ahead and route my bass there too. So you take your bass, you would pretty much like always do this. You want to just cut out all the high frequencies. Even though it looks like there's basically nothing and it's not that audible, in the context of your bigger song, there's going to be a little bit of clashing that you won't hear. So yeah, essentially I'm going to cut out my high frequencies on the bass, and I'm going to go to my piano and I'll cut out the low frequencies. So in essence, like they're filling up different parts of the overall frequency spectrum. So like my bass is just bass with no high frequencies to clash with like my melody or anything like that. And I would say like EQing is probably your most powerful tool in the overall effects that you'd add to your instruments. But yeah, the biggest takeaway, I guess, is like make sure each instrument has a kind of its own space in the frequency spectrum, and you don't want too many instruments to be like clashing in the same area. It'll be like particularly noticeable if you have multiple bass instruments in the same frequency. It'll sound really muddy. Or if you have multiple things in the high end, they'll also kind of not sound good together. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to like layer 10 instruments to like fill out the whole spectrum. If you do that, it might sound, or it'll probably sound really good. And often that's what I'll find myself do. I'll kind of like write a chord progression or something and then just copy that chord progression 5 times and like make each one a different instrument. And then just by doing that, you'll have like, it'll just sound more full as a whole because each instrument or each sound is just taking up its own unique space. But you don't have to do that necessarily. As long as you, there's a lot of really full sounding and cohesive tracks that are actually like really simple and basic. It all just depends on how well you're able to make them sit in their unique part of the frequency range. So yeah, with that being said, another trick that I would recommend is not only should you EQ to make sure that there's lots of that the track is all full, but you can also add like noise and little effects and Foley effects and things like that. And it sounds really simple. It sounds pretty minor, but doing that and sprinkling it throughout your track will actually take it a long, long way. One really basic thing that I like to do, and I know a lot of other producers do it, is just take some white noise, put it on your track, and turn it like 99% of the way down. That way, it just kind of fills up the frequency spectrum a little better. Another thing people will do would be like a crowd cheering or something, and they'll just turn it all the way down just so it kind of fills out the track as a whole. And it doesn't sound like a big thing, but doing it consistently will really take your track take your track very far. So I'll show you an example where I made an intro basically just by, oh, that's not it. Just by throwing together tons of samples, and it's literally just noise effects and little like clicks and Foley samples and things that I did, but it sounds pretty full when I literally just like threw tons of different effects in. And yeah, if I broke it down, there's tons of just little weird sounds, you know? They're all just weird things, which all are like pretty minor on their own, but doing this in the context of your song will just help fill out that frequency range and make it sound more full as a whole. And yeah, like I said, sounds super simple, sounds like, oh, that doesn't, or like, it's so simple, it's easy to overlook, but honestly, just add white noise to every track you make and turn it 99% of the way down. It'll really fill it out. And doing things like that consistently are really subtle, but in the grand scheme, they make a big difference. Now I'm gonna talk about, oh yeah, another thing along those lines is just using effects in general. Like I have a huge library of sample packs where like, I'll give you an example of some of the effects. Like, oh, okay, that's not a good example. Also, shout out Mr. Bill. He's really good. Okay. Here, if okay. Let me find what I'm looking for. Sweeps, yes. Down sweeps. You can honestly just Google like transition effects or upriser effects or down sweep effects, things like that. All these things that I'm clicking are really good for transitioning parts of your song and creating like distinct sections. Once again, like it sounds pretty minor. It's just it's just one effect sample, but in the context of your song, if you use tons of like white noise up sweeps and down sweeps and things like that, it'll really make it easier to kind of have your track flow and distinctly transition between different parts of the track. Another thing is, yeah, try and like diversify your track. Not diversify, but you don't want to have like one loop for the whole song. You want to maybe like add different effects or different filters to different parts of the song, and add different transitions at different parts of the songs just to like create an overall sense of movement, I'm gonna go ahead and make something really quick, hopefully, and walk you through it. So I'm not gonna play a melody. I'm just gonna find some loop somewhere. Hopefully this turns out well. I'm really doing it on the fly. That's not what I want. Whoa. Cool, this is fun. Escargot. So, oh yeah, one more thing. Here is where you adjust the tempo of your track. That's one important thing, is like every sample you use is going to be a different tempo. If you get good samples, they'll be labeled with the tempo. Like here, I know it's 121, and I'm just going to drag it in right here. And now let me go ahead and shorten it a little, and I'll just loop it. Yeah, this is me doing it in the playlist view. Now I'm gonna go find some percussion. I'll use this too. So one important thing to know is that percussion is tonal a lot of the time, not always, but it's really easy to find percussion samples and just have them not fit, and you wonder why. It's because the percussion is not in the key of your song. The way to fix that would be like to tune your percussion to be in the key of the song, but that usually takes too much time for me. So I'll just pick percussion that sounds good and sounds like it fits. And I'll just do that by playing it and just clicking through samples until I find one I like. I like this one, and I'll just drag it in and make a basic beat really quick. Yeah. Oh. Yes. And I'll get a snare. Cool, that's fun. Ooh. Okay. Cool, this is gonna be really basic, but. One thing I'd recommend is the easiest way to get started is just making like beats. In my mind, those are like simpler versions of more complicated songs, and it's a really easy way to just get the hang of things. So whatever, I got something going on here. And then I'm just gonna copy and paste it. Yeah. Okay, but I'm running out of time, so I'm just gonna break down a song that I've made in the last few minutes to kind of show how this would all fit in a greater context. So here is a song I have. So for example, in the background, I have tons of tiny, like it's so subtle you wouldn't think it's doing much, but in the context of the song, it is doing a lot. So then when you play it, all those sounds in the background are kind of filling it out a lot more. I have one basic vocal loop somewhere here, but everything else is just other samples that I've kind of thrown on top of it. And then I start off with just this intro, and then I kind of, all this here is the percussion I've laid out, and it kind of gets in more into the song. And then here I have some build-up stuff going on, which I'll show you. So I have a sample like this that just will play, and you'll see what it does. It's really slow, but this white noise is creating a sort of like build-up effect. And I have a lot of other samples that are just adding to that effect. And it goes, and it builds up, and then just here's all the percussion here. And then this is all like, they're all just different elements and plenty of samples that are just thrown out through my MIDI to kind of spice it up and make it sound full. Am I about out of time? Okay, yeah. I'd love to talk to all of you after. Feel free to ask me any more questions or anything like that. I hope that taught you something about music production. Yeah, thanks.